So I made this decision for myself to leave corporate America. And you have this picture that I'm going to go be an entrepreneur and it's going to be great because I'm going to have time freedom, financial freedom, location freedom. And ultimately I do now have those things, but it's taken me 18 months to get there. And the 18 month season that I'm exiting right now has been by far the most trial-ridden, difficult, uncertain, ambiguous time in my entire life.
Welcome back to Brian Bandas Builds a Business, where we talk about how to develop real estate, how to build a business, and how to do all that while keeping a healthy mind, body, and spirit. Now, this video is the first episode of something I'm calling Talks on Hard Times. Talks on Hard Times came about because, as some of you may know, as I've been working through the process of building my company from zero to $10 million per year, which is a heck of a goal. Man, this last year has been very challenging, and I know I'm not the only one. And my assumption is if you're watching this, you're probably a real estate developer or real estate investor, or at least an aspiring developer or investor. You're an entrepreneur of some kind, and the truth is, you're probably going through hard times because that's what entrepreneurs do. So for me, the point of Talks on Hard Times is twofold. Number one, you need to know that if you're going through a hard time, if you're an entrepreneur, real estate developer, you are not alone. And you're not going through this time because you are just inept or you're being punished for something. And number two, I want you to hear from some really awesome people on how they walked through their own hard times. What were the habits and the thought processes that allowed them to walk through those times with courage? If you want to hear more encouraging conversations like the one I'm about to have with Chandler Spence, then be sure and click the subscribe button below. And I hope that you're encouraged and enlightened by the conversation that I had with my good friend, Chandler Spence. Let's get it. So this is the first installment of the Talks About Hard Times conversations that I want to have on my YouTube channel. Thanks for being my first guest.
Thanks for having me.
I know that you have put yourself in positions where you've had to go through challenging things. And what was that experience? You know, how did you go through that? What did you learn? How did you get through it? That type of thing. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. But first, I guess I want to take a second to sort of tell everybody who you are. This is my good friend, Chandler Spence. Chandler is I would say, a serial entrepreneur for years. A lot of different endeavors, a lot of success in a lot of different endeavors. You do have a corporate background in medical sales, where you had a lot of success there as well. You own real estate. We're invested together on some of my development projects. And you're somebody who, over the past few years, we've gotten close and I've come to really respect you. That's why you're here, because I know from experience that you have wisdom to share.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Hopefully I can underpromise and overdeliver.
Would you add anything that you want people to know about you to my little brief description?
Yeah, I mean, so my formal training, my formal background is in corporate medical device sales.
Yeah.
So I spent 10 years working for a Fortune 200 company, started as a sales associate, kind of at the bottom of the ranks, rose my way up into sales leadership over that 10-year period, and loved every minute of it. I worked for a fantastic company, made a bunch of best friends at work. Like that 10-year period, as I look back on it now, was one of the best times of my life so far. But I arrived at this point where I started to feel a little bit like a caged animal. And I knew there was something else that I wanted to be doing in a different type of future that I saw for myself. And I really wanted to pursue a more passion-filled, purpose-driven lifestyle.
I actually don't know what experience you're going to share, so I don't know if this is a direct segue or not. But here's the question. Can you describe to me, in as much detail as you feel comfortable sharing, the story of the hardest thing that you've gone through, either in business or, if you want, in your personal life? Tell the story, describe the situation.
So I think in someone's life, there's a series of pivot points. And so in my life, I felt like my journey from birth until college was pretty well mapped out. I was a good student in school. I was an athlete, and I was a good athlete. And so going into high school, I was the captain of the football team. I was the president of the school council. I had straight A's. I had college scholarships. And so I kind of had everything at my disposal.
Was your hair that good at the time?
My hair was not this long at the time.
Okay,
This was a recent phenomenon. And it's part of my rebellious entrepreneur stage.
Yeah,
that
I
I'm
love
going
it.
through. So go to college, receive a full scholarship to play football.
Okay.
And that was kind of my first pivot point, because when you go from high school to college in any type of sport, you realize that in your high school you might be the best player on the team. But when you get to college, you're just one player of many, because everybody was the best player on their team.
Yeah.
And so you go through these cycles of pivot points. And so that was my first pivot. Second pivot was leaving college and going into the real world. There's this void that gets created, leaving a locker room, the camaraderie with your teammates, your own little bubble that you live in college life. And so that was another pivot point, is starting to realize I got to go get a job. I got to figure out what I want to do with my life. But I would say the hardest circumstance that I went through was a blessing and a curse, kind of all wrapped up into one. So as I mentioned, I spent 10 years in medical device sales, and I had this itch to leave and want to do something more, something different, provide for my family, spend more time with my family, but still earn a good income.
Yeah.
And so I chose voluntarily to leave that career and pursue some of these entrepreneurial ventures, which on paper and on the surface it sounds like, well, yeah, that's what everyone would want to do, and that would be an easy decision to make. I can tell you it was not an easy decision to make, because you're leaving out this very well mapped out plan that you had for your life, and you're trying to escape this kind of gravitational force of a career. So as you accelerate through a career, you get wrapped into the promotions and the pay raises and some of the responsibilities and notoriety that you gain. And so exiting that gravitational pull of that career was difficult, but I was committed to doing it because I saw something different for myself.
I mean, you're definitely leaving behind a degree of comfort, right? It's a big name company. You can go and tell somebody, oh yeah, I'm, at this level in this company, there's automatic recognition and respect. I mean, there's a lot there that even if it's the right move that you're walking away from.
Yeah, you wear a name badge, and that's what garners your respect. It's not who you are or what you're doing. It's really your name badge and what you represent for that company that kind of gets you into those rooms. So I made this decision for myself to leave corporate America, and you have this picture that I'm going to go be an entrepreneur, and it's going to be great because I'm going to have time freedom, financial freedom, location freedom, and ultimately I do now have those things, but it's taken me 18 months to get there. And the 18-month season that I'm exiting right now has been by far the most trial-ridden, difficult, uncertain, ambiguous time in my entire life. And it felt like I stepped off the ledge with what I thought I knew what I wanted to do, but you enter this zone where you've never been there before. You're leaving everything behind, and you realize that so much of your identity can get wrapped up into, hey, Brian, what do you do?
I'm an entrepreneur.
That's the question everyone asks. Hey, what's your name? What do you do? And I had a difficult time articulating that, and so I realized I had a lot of my own identity wrapped up in what I did for a living instead of who I was, instead of in my faith. And instead of being a provider for my family, I was kind of deprioritizing those things, and it was all about, I'm Chandler, the medical device sales leader.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of get hit with this, well, who am I?
Yeah.
What do I want to accomplish? What do I represent? And I found myself almost starting from scratch, like really struggling to identify and understand who I was and what I wanted to be in this next season of life.
It's hard to separate who I am from what I do. I mean, we all, even if somebody came to me and said, who are you? At least a portion, if not a large portion of my answer would be, oh, developer, business owner, entrepreneur.
Right.
Like, well, that isn't who I am. That is things that I do.
Yeah, you start to list off in order of what you think is going to get you the most respect out of the person in that conversation. Because I completely agree with you. If someone were to ask me who I am now, and I have full confidence in this, it is I am a disciple for Jesus in the kingdom. I am husband to Kim, and I am father to 2 amazing kids.
Yeah.
18 months ago, I would have said, well, I'm a real estate investor. I'm an Airbnb superhost. I run e-com brands on Amazon. I'm starting algorithmic trading for passive income. Yeah. And it was just kind of this verbal vomit of things that people were kind of like, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're doing. And so I needed to simplify that, not only for myself, but also how I thought of myself and represented myself, so that not only people would understand, but I was reaching true fulfillment and satisfaction with the direction that I was taking my next season of life.
What has your experience been, the emotions and the thoughts as you've walked through this 18-month period?
Yeah, I think fundamentally it comes down to this forced pairing between habits and intention.
Okay.
And so we've all got habits that we develop over time, good and bad habits. I had a professional habit of wanting to be the hardest worker, the longest worker, put in, the most amount of time, because that was a direct correlation to success.
Isn't that's a sports mindset, right? You're the first
be.
one on the field, you're the last one to leave, you practice longer and more, you're Kobe Bryant, and therefore you're better than everybody.
Because there's a direct correlation, typically, between those two things. Well, as an entrepreneur, that was rigid, that was selfish, and I needed to be more flexible, more nimble, more agile in the businesses that I was creating in order to adapt to what investors and customers were wanting, instead of just staring at a computer screen, putting in work, but that wasn't quality work. So I think the difference was letting go and retraining my brain on some of those habits and becoming more intentional with the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
If I can work in my office for 3 hours, but it's very intentional, focused, deep work, that is far greater and beneficial than working in my office for 10 hours with distracted, low quality work. And so that was the big difference, is like really focusing and setting goals for myself that I could achieve on a daily basis.
In the whole success culture, both of those voices are very loud right now, and they're conflicting. And you have really successful people on both sides. They're both compelling, right? There's a part of me that sort of likes the simplicity of work your ass off. That's how you know you're going to be okay. When I'm hit with those fears, it's a very simple solution. Doesn't require faith except in myself. Just work harder, work more. That's pretty tempting and pretty compelling, especially when you're running up against that fear and discomfort. But I have noticed that, to oversimplify it, the work smarter, not harder belief system is becoming more prominent.
Right. Am I busy or am I productive? There's
For sure.
a huge difference.
And I know when I get to the end of a block of work, which one it was, typically. My next two questions are, how did you get through this time? What did you use? What did you turn to? Who did you turn to get through the more challenging and dire moments?
The two easy answers are my faith. It got me through the darkest of times, the most uncertain of times. And I don't want to be tongue-in-cheek. Like, my dark times pale in comparison to some people's dark times.
Yeah, I don't think it's about comparison, right?
No, you're right.
It's context. And I especially think it has to do with what's important to you. So your dark time isn't whether or not you're starving, but your dark time is some version of, am I going to be able to get the things that I hope for and long for out of my life?
In the crypto space, we call that FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
There you go.
Those are my dark moments, was FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because as an entrepreneur, that can be paralyzing. So I leaned heavily on my faith. I leaned heavily on my spouse. And then I follow a newsletter writer that I was telling you about earlier named Sahil Bloom. And he talks about this kind of phenomenon called the Medici effect. And so back during the Renaissance age, all of the best craftsmen and artists would flock to Florence, Italy, because that was kind of like the center of activity for...
Is that where Michelangelo was doing his thing?
It could have been.
I don't know.
It's kind of the center for revival, right? So his point is, you've got the best in the world at their craft in one area. The other craftsmen and artists wanted to be in that area because they wanted to work with the best. They wanted to talk to the best, learn from the best. And so kind of taking that mental model into my entrepreneurial journey, it's been surrounding myself with the best of the best. So for me, that's looked like mastermind groups, of which you and I are both a part of one, that I've been with for the longest, but it's godly, strong men who are business owners, entrepreneurs, and investors.
And what I like about that group is there's a lot of business success, but that group in particular It's not a bunch of guys doing that at the expense of their families. It's this holistic success that I would look at everyone at that table and say, they've been able to do what they wanted to do in business without sacrificing those things which are most important.
Which is critical, right? Like, so when you go into an entrepreneur or like, entrepreneurship mastermind group,
Yeah.
you got to make sure that your priorities align with the groups and vice versa. Because what's the first thing we talk about? We do a devotional.
Yeah.
The second thing we do is we do family updates.
Yeah.
So you can tell just by the structure of our meetings, faith is number one, family is number two, and then we might talk about some happenings in our business if we have time.
Yeah.
And so those priorities align with my personal priorities. And so it's been refreshing to kind of reset my paradigm on that, and just put things back into context where they belong. Because you get so clouded with social media, the hustle culture, influencers and things like that, to where it can get murky for you. And so it's nice to have that reset time with other strong men whose priorities align with yours, to kind of reset your mind and get back on the right track.
So crucial. When you say, you mentioned first your faith and then your wife, Kim. Mm-hmm. Give me a little bit of a nitty gritty, detailed picture. You wake up and it's one of those days where you're just like, what am I doing? Whatever the thoughts are, right? How does your faith help? What do you do? Are we just talking about you say a 10-minute prayer? I mean, what does it really look like for your faith to actually be helpful in that moment? I think for a lot of people, it's really easy to just hear the headline, well, I just lean on my faith. Mm-hmm. What does that actually mean?
It's a great question. And I'm glad we're drilling down on this, because you're exactly right. If I hear someone say, well, my faith is important to me, I immediately want to double tap and say, okay, let's talk about that. Like, what role does it play in your day-to-day life? So it's a great question. So what I've found in my own personal practice is, you have two choices when you wake up in the morning. Mm-hmm. Most of us wake up before the sun rises, right? So you can either wake up and start scrolling Twitter, look at your phone, check market prices, see what's happening with the rest of the world, or you can go have some quiet time. You can do a devotional, you can read through some scripture, or you can just be still and be quiet. Because you think about on a day-to-day basis, when are we ever still or quiet? We've always got the radio going, we've got kids needing something, you just always have something. And so that morning routine is precious and it's sacred. Yeah. Because it sets the foundation for the rest of your day. And it can look different for everybody. For me, I try to do a devotional, a little bit of scripture in the morning, because it just changes the trajectory of the rest of the day for me. Yeah. And so if I'm able to do that, my day is off to a better start than if I don't. Yeah. And if I don't, I've consciously noticed that the first thing I do is I look at Twitter, and I allow the world's headlines to infiltrate my brain as my first thought. You just feel stressed, you feel shaky, you feel like you're standing on uncertain ground.
It feels out of control.
It feels out of control.
And it is, right? That's not even necessarily an incorrect feeling. It's out of my control anyway. And the challenge for me is making that connection. I can do the actions of start my day right, read, pray. But then later in the day, when I'm not sitting staring at the Bible, or I'm not actively in prayer, and this thing happens with the city or with a subcontractor or with an investor or whatever, now the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. What is that experience for you? You start the day with these actions that feed you. Mm-hmm. How do you take that information and translate it to those dark moments where it's like, man, I don't really see immediate evidence that I'm cared for right now?
Yeah. Interesting thought. So just in this morning's Bible study, we were talking through Ephesians 2, and it's so plainly clear about the renewing of your mind is a core component of coming to faith. Because when you're in the day-to-day and you're getting pulled in a million different directions, you have needs from everyone around you, it's really easy to fall into that trap of like, you're trying to be Stretch Armstrong, and do everything for everyone. Yeah. But ultimately, we know that's not possible, because you'll either bankrupt yourself or you'll bankrupt your spirit. You know, like you will be emotionally defeated. So I think it's just reading certain scriptures over and over and over, memorizing them, committing them to memory, because in those moments, instead of like going to flip through the Bible, which is not always realistic, you can just kind of meditate on them quietly to yourself in your car. Instead of listening to sports radio, you can just...
See, I feel like you're attacking me personally now.
No, I'm just bringing it up as a point. Just sit there and meditate on some of the things that you read prior. You know, and just... Yeah. I had a mentor of mine in the medical device world explained this analogy to me, and I think it makes a ton of sense, and I carry it with me even now. And he said, when things feel good, like they're going too fast and things are getting out of control, think of yourself like Tom Brady reading the defense. So you're the quarterback, you're doing your pre-snap reads. Slow the game down. Read the defense. Who are the players on the field? Where's the blitz coming from? Who are my receivers that I know are going to be open?
That's almost a threat and opportunity, like SWAT, right? You're going,
a little bit,
who's the threat? Who am I, where's my opportunity? Who can I go to? Who can I turn to?
But you can't do that unless you slow the game down.
Yeah.
Like, let the game come to you, slow it down. If someone's trying to put you in a pinch and rush you, it's probably for a reason that benefits them and not you.
Man, yeah, that's a great point. My last question is, through this period of time, through these challenges, how has it changed you?
How has it changed me? I think it's changed me in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Some that I expected, that were necessary changes, and then some that I didn't expect. Kind of from the tactical standpoint, everything we just talked about, trying to slow the game down, trying to be more intentional with habits and routines than I was before. Instead of trying to chase every shiny object and do every little thing, I know that that doesn't bring me joy, nor does it bring me success when you spread yourself too thin. So I think it's spending time intentionally, spending money intentionally, but then ultimately trying to build something bigger than myself and thinking with generational wealth in mind. And so my mindset has shifted from when I first left corporate America, it was all about cash flow, creating it, maintaining it, enduring it. And that's more of like a daily, weekly task.
Okay.
Now that has evolved into more of a 5, 10, 15, 20 year outlook on how do we produce wealth and then how do we preserve that wealth.
Yeah.
And so it's less of a day-to-day stressor now, and it's more of a year-to-year, how am I going to leapfrog this current season or situation that I'm facing into something bigger and better.
Got you.
And so slowing things down has helped a lot with that, but also enduring some of these challenges and just getting walloped upside the head on several occasions teaches you to think bigger and more long-term, because ultimately you're still doing the same amount of work, but you just need to think bigger, as everyone says, and that's a little cliche, but thinking bigger can actually get you to the finish line faster.
Man, I've even done some videos about this. I think one of the most crucial changes that I've experienced is a transition to a longer term mindset.
Yep.
And I used to not, man, anything that was that kind of timeline, I wasn't going to mess with. There was such an urgency in this like hectic panic, but that cuts you off from some of the best moves you can make.
Yeah.
And you miss out on the opportunity to even consider and brainstorm bigger ideas.
That's the big takeaway, is that if you're constantly in the grind and you're hustle, you miss the opportunity for self-reflection and evaluation of what game am I playing, and is the prize that I'm chasing worth it to me? Like, is that the actual prize that I want?
Oh, yeah.
Because if it's not, I don't need to be playing this game. And so let me go find another game to play, and creating a market of one, like differentiating yourself amongst all of your possible competitors. That only happens by having time for self-reflection, which only happens by being still and thinking and processing through what you're doing and why you're doing it.
My first experience of that, when Oliver was first born, my oldest son, for those who don't know, I reflected at that moment on my music career, which was still my career. And that was the moment where I looked at the prize and the road between me and the prize. And I was like, I don't think so.
Well, and then you pivoted into a new career, but you wouldn't have made that pivot had you not done your self-reflection.
Yeah.
And the prerequisite to all of that is really understanding what game am I playing and what's the prize. And it's
100%.
okay to say, I'm going to cut bait from this because it doesn't benefit my family or doesn't benefit my time.
Yeah.
Pivoting to something new, but then once you do that, going to be the very best at it.
So would you change any of the decisions you've made? I'm not talking about day to day. Everybody does stupid stuff day to day. But would you change anything that you decided to do based on some of the painful experience?
Painful experiences are needed to grow.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I feel like I have true alignment now. And so there's this tremendous amount of peace that comes to your life when you find alignment with who you want to be and what you represent and what your goals are. So for me, that's to live this passion-filled, entrepreneurial life that's purpose-driven. So my purpose is my family and my faith. My passion is creating micro solopreneur businesses that are a one-man shop that generate a lot of cash flow.
Which you are very good at.
And to slowly compound those businesses into $5, $10, $15 million a year top-line revenue businesses.
Can you give, for fun, a very quick synopsis of the business you have going right now?
Yeah, so it's a couple different ones. We've kind of got, I would call it a development business between the two of us. I'm the investor, you're the GC.
8 units right now? Well, 8 that you and I have, just us, that we're going to hold. And then you're in another, I think you're in another 4, 6, maybe 8 units that we're going to sell.
So under the real estate investing umbrella, you and I are building to rent 8 units, 5 of which will be, actually 9 units, 5 of which will be short-term rentals.
Yep.
I'm a capital investor on 4 units that you're building to sell. The other subset of that is my wife and I own and operate a portfolio of 4 short-term rentals in Nashville. So that's the real estate component. We have an e-commerce component where we run 2 brands that sell products on Amazon. I've just recently kind of stumbled across just entrepreneurial luck. Is when you put yourself out there, you find some of these great ideas that are worth pursuing. I found basically a way to algorithmically trade different public markets. And so you can create automatic trading robots that will use set parameters that will go trade stocks, bonds, crypto, Forex, all these different asset classes for you 24/5 with no input from you. So that's truly the closest thing to passive income that I've found. And so I'm pursuing a lot of that with time and resource right now. But just continuing to compound some of these ideas, executing on them in a way that makes sense for our financial picture, that's not reckless. And so it's a lot of fun just kind of compounding these little businesses along the way.
What would you want to tell anybody watching this who hasn't met you before? Where can they follow you, or what would you ask them to do to engage with you moving forward? Because you do have a lot to offer.
Well, thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
I'll give you your $20 later.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'm passionate about is teaching and coaching. So before I got into med device sales, for a small stint between college and my career, I was a substitute teacher. Because I'm passionate about teaching and coaching. And so I had a lot of mentors and other people pour into me to get me to where I'm at today. So I love mentoring and coaching and helping people get ahead. And just exposing them to new ideas. So I'm always open for a conversation. The easiest way to get in touch with me is through Instagram. So my handle is the Chandler Spence. And I've got a calendar link on there where someone can schedule time just to chit chat. Yeah.
Man, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was
dude,
fun.
You're the man. All right, guys, that's the first talks about hard times. There's more coming because I know that we all go through it. Everybody deals with it. And I want to share encouragement and wisdom, and I want it for myself, selfishly, to understand how to walk through these things and how we get better. So, we'll see you next time.